Russia's UK ambassador, Andrei Kelin, has just accused Britain of involvement in Ukraine's devastating drone attacks. Destroyed, it says here, more than 40 Russian warplanes, warning the strikes risk escalating the conflict to World War III.
Well, that's what Medvedev was saying, who used to be the president of Russia. You know, you're playing, you know...
If the Russians have got evidence the British were behind this, they would be within their rights, wouldn't they, to hit Britain? In fact, possibly even with a nuclear strike.
Well, I don't think a nuclear strike...
their nuclear doctrine.
Yes, I know. I think you could say...
If their nuclear-capable bombers are hit, that crosses their nuclear retaliation threshold.
Well, it could do, but I think the way the Russians are playing it is they're treating this as terrorist attack rather than attack on... You know, they're not overreacting. Because they know that the purpose of this is to make them overreact. Are you following me? They're trying to keep open the door to negotiations with Trump, but at the same time, and they don't want to do anything to destabilise that, not because they believe they're going to get anything from Trump. It's just that they want the rest of the world to see that we bend over backwards to avoid doing silly things. And in actual fact, by and large, they do. They haven't been... That's why they don't immediately respond to anything like this. They have a good old think about it. And, of course, their attitude is revenge is a dish best eaten absolutely cold. And, of course, if they did decide to attack Britain, they would. There wouldn't be any warning, and it wouldn't be just symbolic.
OK, so the Russian ambassador was explicit about Britain's alleged involvement. He said, "We perfectly know how much London is involved, how deeply British forces are involved in working together with Ukraine."
Yeah, well, what they have done, and they've made this definitely a priority, is they're killing all British military personnel inside Ukraine as a priority.
But he's also making the point, he said he expresses doubts about American participation, saying, "I don't believe America is involved. It's been denied by President Trump, definitely, but it has not been denied after we accused London."
Well, that's right. So what's interesting here, like we were talking about Srebrenica earlier, there's a split between the British position and the US position. And of course the Russians are aware that that's something that they can work around. So they're not... What may happen, and I think our British listeners should recognise this, if we become public enemy number one for the Russians, there's always going to be possible for the Russian General Staff to do nasty stuff to Britain, not necessarily to civilian targets either, military targets, and then they dare the Americans to do anything about it, because they won't touch the Americans, yeah? The British are being the awkward ones here, so we're going to put an Oreshnik on the Akrotiri airbase and kill 500 of your RAF personnel. What are you going to do about it?
The drone strikes, dubbed Operation Spiderweb by Ukrainian authorities, destroyed, apparently, on 1/3 of Russia's strategic cruise missile aircraft, causing an estimated, again, according to the Ukrainians, £5.2 billion worth of damage.
I was going to say, who's saying this? The Ukrainians?
Yes.
Well, they would say that, wouldn't they, in the immortal words of man.
Any idea? We don't know.
We don't know. I mean, as you say, these planes are out in the open because the Russians are playing by the rules as agreed. Even though the START treaty has been ripped up, they're still leaving the planes out there so that the other side can see how many we've got. And their satellites have been doing... In the US, these big bombers are outside so they can be seen by satellites. So even though the START treaty has been ripped up, people are still kind of going along with the main bit of it. Because it's a vested interest of everybody for any war or conflict not to turn into a nuclear war. The same goes with India and Pakistan, you know. Neither side wants a nuclear war when it comes down to it because it's a disaster for everybody. Now, the Russians know this very well. They're quite rational. I fear that people like Hamish de Bretton Gordon are not nearly as smart as they think they are. They want to go around picking fights with people who are much tougher than they are, and when they get a punch in the face, like Mike Tyson said, everybody's got a plan until they get punched in the face. maybe what's needed for Keir Starmer and Kemi Badenoch and Nigel Farage to understand our position in the world is for Britain to get a good old punch in the face. And I don't mean killing civilians. I mean soldiers.
Well, America is clearly divided about whether or not the Russians are a problem or the threat. And that division was, I think, very much expressed over the last 24 hours with the spat between Elon Musk and Donald Trump. So Musk next week will be going to Stockholm to the Bilderberg conference. This is this conference I've been following for many years, and it seems to me that it's impossible for Musk to go along to that conference. It's something he may attend in person. It may be via some video link. Quite often they say he's not there, but actually he is, as we saw in Lisbon with Yuval Noah Harari turning up in Lisbon, and yet he wasn't on the list from the conference at all. So the Bilderberg meetings we'll talk about in a second, but let's start by looking at this spat between Trump and Musk. Elon's going to do this, Elon's going to do that before he's elected. Now Elon's turned on Donald, hasn't he? It does make it look as if maybe Elon is in charge and Donald Trump isn't.
Well, I think from the rest of the world's point of view, it just looks like a shambles. Do they have
Isn't that the idea?
Oh, well, they could be fooling us that it's a shambles, or it could just be a shambles.
The political leaders aren't really the leaders, and they never were. Maybe.
Well, no, but Musk is now saying that Trump had never been elected if he didn't give him loads of money. And so you've reached the point where the wealthy who buy the politics now think that they can just dismiss the politicians if they don't like them.
He's also saying Trump should be impeached today.
Yes, and yes, that's right. So in other words, instead of just saying I've fallen out with him, like the chap from Farage's party, the Muslim chap, saying, well, I just don't want to be in it anymore, he's saying that he should be impeached. Now this, of course, creates all, this is a, from any point of view, this is a shambolic administration.
Well, he's breaking things, isn't he?
Yeah. Well, that's right, because they all believe in moving fast and breaking things.
Anyway, so on the subject of Bilderberg, do you want to ask me a few questions about the Bilderbergers? This is all happening next weekend in Stockholm at the Grand Hotel. It starts on really the Wednesday and finishes on the Sunday. So this is a Bilderberg conference has been going since 1954, and I have a website called Bilderberg.org, which has been up there since, about 1997.
Right, so you've been following them since 1997. What is the significance of Bilderberg? Who goes? What do they discuss?
Well, it's very much linked to NATO. They go from the NATO countries. Any of the participants that aren't from the NATO countries, they tend to be there for some specific reason, like they're from the Carnegie Endowment, based in China or something. So there are a few people not from the NATO countries. The significance is it's very much tied to the military. There's lots of military people that go. There's lots of media owners that go, and there's also lots of finance people that go. So those are probably the three main types. Sometimes pharmaceutical people have been going to these conferences, but basically it seems to me to be the Western NATO countries, financial people, and the military, plus various industries that they fund and control.
Where was the first Bilderberg conference?
That was in Oosterbeek in Arnhem in Holland in 1954.
And who was the first president of Bilderberg?
The chairman was a guy called Prince Bernhard of the Netherlands, but the conference itself was set up by a chap called Joseph Rettinger, who was working for MI6, and he was a Freemason, and he was Polish, he was the guy that organised the first conference. It was also quite interesting chatting to German Klaus Kopf years ago about the very first meeting, because it was all very hush-hush. People were sent round to knock on people's doors and saying, we're having this meeting, would you like to come? And it was quite significant that it was someone called Cardinal Frings, who was the Catholic Bishop of Cologne, or Cardinal of Cologne, who'd been right the way through the war. Some of the people in Cologne thought he was a Nazi collaborator, but he was the one that went and knocked on doors to say, would you please come to this Bilderberg conference? So it's interesting that it's all, that part of it was connected to the Jesuits, maybe the Vatican.
So, as you say, it was happened in Oosterbeek in the Bilderberg Hotel, which was part of the Polish pocket or Kessel at Arnhem. Why do you think Arnhem was chosen as the place for the first Bilderberg conference?
Well, that's what it took me quite a while, probably 20 years to figure out. And it became pretty obvious that the purpose of holding the first meeting there was really kind of an in-joke, because this had been the operation in the Second World War in Arnhem, the Battle of Arnhem, The Bridge Too Far being the film, was where the British actually deliberately lost the battle. The British commanders sacrificed thousands of British soldiers in Arnhem in order to buy time for the Nazis to squirrel away their wealth in Switzerland and elsewhere and get themselves organised for a Fourth Reich after the Second World War. This was all in train after something called the Red House Meeting, which German industrialists had held in August 1944. The next month in September, this massive operation by Montgomery, mainly Montgomery, but also a lot of ground troops as well, and the Americans were involved, to take a bridgehead over the Rhine. And even though the British paratroopers were there and the tanks could have gone along to relieve them, Lord Carrington, who also became a chairman of Bilderberg afterwards, and Secretary General of NATO, was sitting in his tank, and I was shocked and amazed to find out that they refused to go and help them. And so, of course, they didn't get their bridgehead over the Rhine, and this was a major victory, really, for the Germans. And in fact, every year in September in Arnhem, you can go there and there's a kind of victory celebration for this Nazi victory in World War II. So that's why I think Bilderberg was held there in 1954. It was an in-joke that actually this is the point at which the British were cooperating with the Nazis to help them to create a Fourth Reich after the war.
Yes, and you've written a book about this, The Traitors of Arnhem.
The Traitors of Arnhem is the book, yeah. And funnily enough, a few months ago, another book came out called The Traitor of Arnhem. And so if you try and search for my book, you don't find my book. It's quite difficult to find on the search engines. You find this other book now.
And who's in the other books? Have you read the other book or know anything about it?
Well, it's nothing. The thing is that what I discovered was there was a whole operation particularly involving Prince Bernhard of the Netherlands, who was involved in this operation. So it was really the people that had successfully helped the Nazis to create this Fourth Reich and cooperated with the British. They then got together. Bernhard of the Netherlands was at that point he was an ex-SS officer, and at that point he had married into the Dutch royal family, and he was trusted by the British, amazingly, to give him all the information about this invasion of Holland. Well, actually, maybe the British knew, maybe they didn't, but certainly the Americans knew that it was a former SS officer, so they wouldn't tell him anything. But the British, including Montgomery, there are photographs of Prince Bernhard looking over his shoulder, looking at the map of the operation, and clearly he was still then working as a Nazi spy. So I think that's why this has become sort of. I mean, that Arnhem operation has always been a bit of a mystery, but I think I've managed to pretty much untangle the whole thing, including the spy that got sent in to tell the Abwehr that the invasion was the operation was about to start, and that guy almost certainly was allowed to do that by Prince Bernhard himself. In fact, there was a book written called The Traitor of Arnhem, another book, in the 1950s, which had been basically forgotten about by a British intelligence, Dutch. He was actually Dutch, but he was in the British Army, and he nearly managed to stop this guy going in to tell them that the invasion was coming. So there were a lot of people on the British side, and not the American side, I might add, on the British side, trying to make sure that operation in World War II failed, and therefore helping the creation of a Fourth Reich, which I think Bilderberg pretty much represents. That's a financial empire created from the money looted from occupied Europe by the Nazis in World War II.
Okay, Originally, they pretended that they didn't exist at all, didn't they? So for many years, the Bilderberg conference used to take place, and that's why you were able to buy their domain name, because they were still
they were very much undercover. Yeah.
So they didn't bother to buy their own domain name, because if you're secret and you're not having any meetings anyway, you don't need to buy your own name.
Now they do have their own website.
Yes,
but certainly back in the 1990s, they didn't.
Yeah.
And you're right about the secretiveness. The first conference I went to in 2000 in Jeanval in Belgium, that was being publicised at the time as a croquet tournament. So when the people who the local press we were tipping off contacted the hotel and said, no, it's not an international conference, no Henry Kissinger coming here, it's a croquet tournament. And so this is the way they just lie to try and keep the press coverage to a minimum. But as it happened, Grattan, who I was friendly with, he had a friend, he was working for an Irish MEP. He had a friend who was an ex-editor of one of the national newspapers in Belgium, and he managed to get it into the Saturday's paper. And on the Sunday, the whole Belgian press, including all the TV, turned up outside to film all these Bilderbergers. And of course, they then put various coverings on the windows so you couldn't film inside the hotel. And we blew the lid on it in 2000 in the Belgian press. So it was just great fun.
So from 1954 to 2000, they pretended they didn't exist at all.
Well, there was a little bit of coverage, because they do issue a press release which says at the top, and I'm not sure if they still do this, they're certainly doing this in the 1990s and the noughties, saying not for publication. So any journalist that gets a press release saying not for publication, immediately they should become a bit suspicious, shouldn't they?
Well, yes. I mean, you think, what's the point of a press release that's not for publication?
Well, the thing is, a lot of the newspaper moguls are there.
Yes.
So your boss is here, and do not publicise this.
Yeah.
So they're sending a message out that even if news stories do come through, you're not to talk about this, and you get in trouble if you do.
Well, so obviously in the alternative media world in which we function, many people will know, who listen to this show, what Bilderberg's about.
Well, it's much better known than it was, I can tell you, in the 1990s when I started my little mission to publicise it.
So in other words, now, do we know who's going this year?
We really don't, but one thing I can be almost certain is Musk will be there.
Well,
also,
maybe. Has he been before? Has Musk been before?
Yeah, many times.
Okay.
And Alex Karp is another one from Palantir. Now, these have become extremely in the news, particularly since the use of Palantir, Martin. I'm sure you understand what's been going on in Gaza with Palantir.
Well, they're the ones who are providing all the tech support for the massacre, aren't they?
Well, and this whole idea about Daddy's Home.
Yeah.
The idea is that they've developed at Palantir this kill chain. The idea is that computers will identify targets, send off killing devices, drones normally, and actually execute people. So the idea is this is all being done by AI. So it's quite good to see that some people in Palantir, Alex Karp's company, financed by Peter Thiel, who's one of the top people on the Bilderberg steering committee, a financier, who also got a company which is selling people young people's blood plasma in order to stop them getting old, apparently. This is all a bit occultic, isn't it? But anyway, let's have a listen now to Juan Pinto, because there was recently I think, absolutely brilliant investigation into what he'd been saying. He used to work at Palantir, and as Palantir seems to me to be the most obvious way in which these tech giants and the Bilderbergers hope to control warfare in the future, with no kind of moral compass or whatever involved, just being able to press a button and kill tens, hundreds, thousands of people, even commit a genocide at the press of a button. That's what Palantir can deliver for you. So let's have a little listen to what this Palantir whistleblower had to say, since they're a major part of the Bilderbergers, and they are also, Palantir was completely funded by one of the main people at Bilderberg.
It's one thing to criticize your former employer. It's taboo to do that. But to criticize an employer that also owns extremely lethal technologies and surveillance technologies that are highly invasive and used in war zones is something else entirely.
It's 2025. We're all kind of used to government surveillance. The idea that we're all being watched all the time and don't own our own personal data has become normalized. We're also used to the military spending vast amounts of our money on just a few giant defense contractors. But one tech company wants to change both of those things
and become the ultimate military contractor and the ultimate arbiter of all of our data.
Palantir is here to disrupt and make the institutions we partner with the very best in the world, and when it's necessary, to scare enemies and on occasion kill them.
Check out Palantir shares surging 22% after the company cited a boom in demand for its AI software from the U.S. government.
We're doing it. We're doing it. And I'm sure you're enjoying this as much as I am.
Palantir, a tech company based here in Denver, claims they can revolutionize government systems with their data analysis software newly powered by artificial intelligence.
They've been hired by the Department of Defense, the FBI, local police departments, and even the IRS and Wendy's to take in the information those organizations collect even more information, and use that data to draw conclusions.
It can be used to completely reconfigure organizations' ontology, its reality, what systems matter, what information matters, what processes matter, how they are structured, what biases are introduced at each of those stages.
We talked to a former Palantir employee, dug into decades of research, and listened to hours of Alex Karp's own words to unwrap the layers of Palantir's carefully cultivated sales pitch, how they capitalize on fear, uncertainty, and unrest.
I don't think in win-lose. I think in domination. This is a company built for bad times. Bad times mean strong finances internally. Bad times are very good for Palantir because we build products that are robust, that are built for danger.
Let's rewind a little. Palantir's story starts with one of the most effective things a company can have for sales: fear. After the September 11th attacks, the United States government began expanding surveillance both at home and abroad. This was, of course, a boon for the defense industry at large. Simultaneously, the Silicon Valley tech industry was growing fast and making people in a once obscure industry very, very rich, very, very quickly. Like the founders and executives at PayPal, known as the PayPal Mafia. Elon Musk, Reid Hoffman, the LinkedIn guy, and Peter Thiel. When PayPal was sold, Thiel had millions of dollars burning a hole in his pocket and an idea. PayPal had developed systems for detecting fraud and crimes on the platform. What if they could use similar thinking to analyze the world at large? So Thiel pulled from his network to build out a new company. One of the first hires was Thiel's Stanford Law School roommate, Alex Karp, who'd gone on after Stanford to get a PhD in not business or computer science or engineering, but neoclassical social theory. They named the company Palantir, after the Palantiri from J.R.R. Tolkien's Lord of the Rings.
In Lord of the Rings, a Palantir stone is a magical object that allows its users to predict the future or to see what's going on in a remote location.
It was originally created by the elves. It was meant to be used for good purposes. It is potentially a very dangerous technology. It's very powerful.
Long have you hunted me?
So that's Middle Earth, but what does Palantir do in a regular Earth?
And what we do is we use what legal scholars call predicate-based research. So we would look at you, and then we would go out and say, oh, there's lots of different things in your life that may be indicative of someone involved in bad behavior.
Put simpler, they make software that makes it easier for their customers to collect and analyze data, and then act on that analysis with and without AI. By 2013, 10 years after their founding, Palantir's client list included the FBI, the CIA, the NSA, the Marines, the Air Force, Special Operations Command, and more.
Did your company help to track and kill Osama bin Laden?
You know, we can never. I'll tell you, the closest thing to an answer is there are when you look at when you open the paper and look in the news about these kind of things, there's a 2/3 chance, depending on the country involved, that somehow my company was involved.
Fundamentally, the mission that is pushed to employees is that we're solving the world's hardest problems and supporting Western institutions. that is the main driver of sort of this militaristic culture that is developed inside of Palantir.
If you do not feel comfortable supporting the legitimate efforts of America and its allies in the context of war, don't join Palantir.
This entire message of like we are the most lethal, we are the most able to surveil and process large amounts of data.
You have created the system which you call kill chain.
Privately. Publicly, the lawyers have some innocuous something like tech for the amelioration of unwanted blah blah blah. Some term we're supposed to use.
Okay, let's.
For me, it's the kill chain.
Kill chain sounds good.
Kill chain isn't an original term created by Palantir. It's the more general military verbiage for the series of decisions leading from identifying a target to taking their life. Palantir's contract added their software and artificial intelligence to the kill chain.
It's quicker and better and safer and more violent.
It's tech that Juan helped market.
It reduces the distance you have to the problem, but when you're able to take a step back and really see all the narratives and how they were shaped and the actual application of these technologies, your whole world starts falling apart, which is something that, definitely happened to me.
Juan didn't leave Palantir entirely for ethical reasons. He just got another job. But the reason he eventually started speaking out against Palantir came after watching the Israeli invasion of Gaza following the October 7th attacks. Palantir has contracts with the Israeli Defense Forces. The exact nature of the contracts is opaque, intentionally, but there is evidence to suggest that Palantir's artificial intelligence tech was used for selecting targets in Gaza. CARP doesn't mind the controversy. In fact, it's part of the marketing.
Palantir will even pick up the projects that other companies rejected for political reasons.
We are very comfortable being unpopular.
CARP doesn't think controversy will lose Palantir customers.
Whatever is pissing them off, they're still buying the product.
Wendy's hired Palantir to help with their supply chain. Palantir works with health insurance companies to build AI for denials management to protect revenue.
Do you want Palantir's AI making decisions about what care is covered for you and your loved ones?
They also do business with for-profit hospitals, major investment banks, and even other defense contractors. In 2024, Palantir brought in nearly $2.9 billion in revenue, 55% of which came from government sources, with the vast majority being American. So let's look at their pitch to the American government. Last year, Palantir CTO Shyam Sankar put out a presentation and white paper called The Defense Reformation. He cites The Last Supper, which was a secretive 1993 meeting between defense industry executives and the Deputy Secretary of Defense. Over a dozen companies walked in, and only a few walked out. That dinner is often cited as the origin of our consolidated military-industrial complex.
So that's really, I'll put the full version of that up on our show page at thisweek.org.uk, but it gives you a pretty good idea of what is the main, I suppose, industrial product of the Bilderbergs, Martin.
Yeah, and what strikes me, of course, is this isn't building a better widget for make the housewives' lives better. It's all ultimately taxpayer money paying for a totalitarian regime, isn't it?
30 billion. Oh, sorry. 30 billion apparently is now the revenue.
Yeah, but I mean, the business model is getting the taxpayer to, by getting into all these military contracts. I think what the tech bros in Silicon Valley, they want the money that used to flow to the mainstream military companies. And we were talking earlier about the British Defence Review, and the only sensible bit in that probably is getting the drone technology and the AI sorted out, because the rest of it
someone somewhere has decided that actually there's more money to be made through war than there is through peace, isn't there?
Well, absolutely, because it's guaranteed money, isn't it? The government are going to, if the government buys the stuff,
which is maybe why
then you've made your sale.
Which is maybe why the Ukrainian peace process is going nowhere.
Well, that's right. It's been a big boondoggle.
The West is not deal ready.
It's been a big boondoggle. Most of the money spent on Ukraine by Britain and by the US taxpayer And it's a hell of a lot more than Nigel Farage, who wants to cut some spending. It could be the defence spending on Ukraine, a country that's nothing to do with us, never part of the British Empire. Why are we fighting there? Of course, there's reasons, because that's what the British Empire does. But yeah, I mean, the way to make money if you are a monopolist like Thiel or Musk is you need to get the government as your customer, because then you're guaranteed the money, whatever. If you've got to sell individual consumers something that's useful to them in shops, where you have to persuade each individual one, then it might be a good idea to buy this. Well, that can be done, but it's a lot of hard work. Much more simple to get the government to pay you, and the government don't even know what they're buying. You can imagine that people paying for this have no idea what they're getting. So it's quite easy to pull the wool over their eyes, and you say, well, this is the world-beating system, give us our $1 billion, please.
Now, this is the world. I find it fascinating the way the Israelis say, oh, we must get rid of Hamas, because if we don't get rid of them, they could destroy the world with their evil terrorism. Well, actually, it's the other way around. It's the Israelis that, if they win, their tactics could spread around the world, and Palantir could spread around the world.
Well, the Israelis could cause by attacking Iran, the Israelis could cause a nuclear war that's going to kill everybody, which is one reason, just in a self-interested reason, why they should be told to stop.
The lust to control other human beings is a story as old as time. There's a very strong drift in the direction of globalization, of the ultimate centralization of control in the hands of unelected officials at supranational organizations.
They want all of the resources of the world in their pocket.
The bigger picture is that an attempt is underway now to collapse liberal democracy and replace it with global technocracy.
This is a coup. They're saying we can control with rules. We don't need currency anymore.
It's like an inverted prison. You are supposedly free to roam about, but everything you want to access is behind lock and key.
The potential for social control is gigantic and potentially irreversible.
They plan to commandeer land, reduce farming, and radically change the food we eat, transform the supply of electricity, and then dictate how we use it, and replace currency with a system of credits. All three strategies are built on the premise of a climate crisis caused by carbon dioxide.
I do not think there's a climate crisis, and I base that on all the evidence and the climate data sets that we build to answer questions just like that. The government is very clear that they want a catastrophic story.
There is no single science paper that proves conclusively that humans control all or most of the global climate.
Europe's mad dash towards net zero is effectively economic suicide. Politicians are purposely impoverishing ordinary people, purposely deindustrializing Europe.
It's just tremendous amount of damage in the name of saving the planet. It does make you ask, what is it we're actually saving if we're paving it over?
I think what we're dealing with here is actually a global war on agriculture.
When you look at how many farms are selling up, we're walking into food shortages.
If I can switch everybody from real food to pharma food, then 100% of the agriculture industry can go through my publicly traded stocks, and I have complete control.
This is the biggest public relations scam in the history of the world. But it's far more than that. It's a blueprint. It is the action plan.
All life on Earth is going to be radically changed.
Everything will be monitored. The environmental consequences of every human action.
The general population cannot fathom the psychopathy of the vision that they're facing.
Once the digital ID is in place, it's game over for humanity.